The truck's suspension groaned as I eased down the final stretch of gravel road. Arthur pressed his nose against the passenger window, leaving smudges that caught the afternoon sunlight. We'd been driving since 5 that morning, stopping only for gas and a quick bathroom break for both of us at a truck stop near the state line. "Almost there, buddy," I said. The road curved left around a stand of pines, and there it was, Grandpa Miller's place. 2 stories of weathered cedar siding with green trim that had faded to the color of lichen. The wraparound porch sagged slightly on the western corner, just as it had when I was 12. I parked beside an overgrown rhododendron and cut the engine. The absence of road noise left a ringing in my ears. Arthur whined softly, his tail thumping against the seat. "I know," I said, scratching behind his ears. "New place. New smells." The key was exactly where the lawyer said it would be, under a fake rock near the porch steps. I collected it and stood for a moment, taking in the property. Maple and pine surrounded 3 sides of the clearing, with a glimpse of the lake through the trees behind the house. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down the road, invisible from here. Arthur bounded up the stairs ahead of me, sniffing enthusiastically at the weathered boards. The porch creaked under our weight. The lock stuck at first, then gave way with a metallic scrape. Inside, the air hung still and cool, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and something else. Furniture polish, maybe. Grandpa had been gone 6 months, but it seemed like his presence lingered in the quiet. The main room looked smaller than I remembered. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall, flanked by built-in bookshelves. Grandpa's rocking chair still faced the window with a view of the birch grove. I ran my hand across its arm, feeling the smooth depression worn by years of his elbow resting in the same spot. "This is home now," I told Arthur, who was circling the perimeter of the room, nose to the floorboards. I hauled in my duffel bags from the truck, 2 with clothes, 1 with kitchen essentials, and another with tools. The bare minimum. Emily had kept most of our shared belongings, which suited me fine. Starting over meant traveling light. The kitchen cabinets held Grandpa's mismatched plates and mugs, all coated with a thin film of dust. I wiped down what I needed and filled a bowl with water for Arthur. He drank noisily while I continued my inspection. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms branched off a narrow hallway. The smallest had been mine during summer visits, still painted blue with a twin bed pushed against the wall. Grandpa's room remained untouched, his flannel shirts hanging in the closet, reading glasses folded on the nightstand. The 3rd room held boxes of old photographs and fishing gear. I opened windows throughout the house, letting cross breezes chase out the stillness. Arthur found a sunny spot on the living room rug and settled with a contented sigh. The afternoon passed in small tasks. I swept floors, wiped counters, made up the bed in Grandpa's room with fresh sheets I'd brought. The work felt good, uncomplicated and necessary. When hunger finally registered, I fired up the old gas stove and made a simple dinner. Canned soup and saltines, eaten standing at the counter while watching dust motes dance in the slanting evening light. Later, I carried a mug of coffee out to the porch and lowered myself into one of the Adirondack chairs. The woods had begun their nightly transition. Birdsong gave way to cricket chirps, and the occasional plaintive call of a whippoorwill. Arthur lay at my feet, head on paws, ears pricking at each new sound. The city, with its constant noise and the cramped apartment I'd shared with Emily, felt impossibly distant. 300 miles of highway and back roads separated me from that life, from her teary accusations and my own defensive anger, from the final door slam and weeks of sleepless nights. The coffee cooled in my hands. Darkness settled fully among the trees, turning them into black silhouettes against a navy sky. No streetlights here, no headlights sweeping across the walls at regular intervals. Just darkness and stillness. I reached down to stroke Arthur's back. Different, huh? He looked up, eyes reflecting the faint light from the kitchen window. Something rustled in the underbrush beyond the clearing, probably a raccoon or a possum. Arthur's head turned sharply toward the sound, but he didn't bark. Just watched, his body tensing slightly under my hand. "It's okay," I murmured. "Just the locals saying hello." I finished my coffee and stood, joints popping after the long drive. Inside, I locked the front door and checked the back. Habit from city living, though it seemed almost silly out here in the woods. Upstairs, I hesitated outside Grandpa's bedroom door. It felt strange to claim his space, but the other beds were too small, still fitted with mattresses meant for children and guests. I set my phone on the nightstand and changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt. Arthur circled 3 times on the braided rug beside the bed before settling with a heavy sigh. The springs creaked as I lay down, staring at the ceiling beams I'd counted as a child during thunderstorms. The house made its own music, soft ticks and groans as wood contracted in the cooling night air. Water moved somewhere in the pipes. Wind brushed tree branches against the eastern eaves. "Good night, Arthur," I whispered. His tail thumped once against the floor. I closed my eyes and listened to the unfamiliar quiet, wondering what Grandpa would think of me hiding out here, starting over at 32. The thought followed me down into sleep, that maybe he'd understand better than anyone why sometimes a man needs to disappear into the woods to find himself again. I woke to sunlight filtering through the curtains and Arthur's tail thumping against the floor beside the bed. The alarm clock on the nightstand showed 8:37, later than I'd normally sleep, but the previous day's drive had taken more out of me than I'd expected. "Morning, buddy," I said, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. After pulling on jeans and a flannel shirt, I made a quick breakfast of instant coffee and peanut butter toast. Arthur circled my feet, his nails clicking against the linoleum until I filled his bowl with kibble from the bag I'd brought. With daylight streaming through the windows, I could better assess what needed attention around the place. Grandpa had maintained the essentials but left cosmetic issues for another day that never came. Water stains mapped the ceiling near the upstairs bathroom. The kitchen cabinet doors hung slightly askew. Most of the windows stuck when opened past halfway. I found a notepad in a drawer and started a list. Replace worn weather stripping. Reglaze bathroom window. Check gutters. Sand and repaint trim. The familiar routine of cataloging repairs steadied me. Every house had its problems. These were fixable at least. In the front closet, I found Grandpa's toolbox. A heavy metal case with a red enamel finish, scratched from decades of use. Inside, his tools remained organized in neat rows, each with a place worn into the foam liner. The hammer handle still bore the groove from his thumb. "Ryan's supposed to come up next weekend," I told Arthur as I examined a rusted claw hammer. "Should make quick work of these repairs between the 2 of us." I worked through the morning, tightening loose doorknobs and oiling squeaky hinges. Around noon, I made a sandwich and ate it on the porch, watching a pair of cardinals dart between the pine branches. After lunch, I tackled the living room. Most of Grandpa's furniture would stay. The worn leather armchair, the oak bookcase, the small writing desk by the window. I sorted through stacks of old hunting magazines and fishing catalogs, tossing the yellowed ones into a cardboard box for recycling. Arthur had been trailing me room to room all morning, but when I started working in the living room, his behavior changed. He paced near the center of the room, his nails clicking in nervous rhythm against the hardwood. Then he stopped by the large braided rug and whined, pawing at its edge. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked, setting down the stack of magazines. He scratched more insistently at the corner of the rug, looking between me and the floor with unusual intensity. When I approached, he backed away, then returned to the same spot, whining louder. "You smell a mouse or something?" I knelt beside him, running my hand over the worn fibers of the rug. Arthur continued pawing at the edge, almost frantic now. I gripped the corner and pulled the heavy rug back, expecting to find a mouse nest or maybe a food stash Grandpa had forgotten. Instead, I uncovered a wooden trapdoor, flush with the floorboards and barely visible except for the seam outlining its square shape. about 3 feet on each side. A recessed metal handle sat in the center, tarnished to a dull copper color. I sat back on my heels, puzzled. I'd spent weeks here every summer as a kid. How had I never noticed this before? The rug must have always covered it, and Grandpa had never mentioned a basement. "Good boy," I said absently, still staring at the trapdoor. Arthur didn't wag his tail at the praise. He backed away several steps, ears flattened against his head. I pressed my palm against the wood. It felt cooler than the surrounding floor, almost cold despite the warm day. The handle was ice cold to the touch, with a thin coating of rust that left orange smears on my fingertips. I hesitated, then gripped the handle firmly and pulled. The door lifted with unexpected ease, as if the hinges had been recently oiled. Cool air rushed up from the opening, carrying a faint metallic scent I couldn't identify. Wooden stairs descended steeply into darkness. I counted 15 steps before they disappeared into the shadows below. No light switch was visible on the wall beside the opening. "Stay here, Arthur." I reached for my phone to use its flashlight. Arthur made no move to follow. He'd retreated to the doorway, watching me with anxious eyes, his body tense. I swung my legs into the opening and tested the first step. It held firm under my weight. The wood felt solid and dry, not rotted as I might have expected in an old house. I descended slowly, sweeping my phone's light back and forth across the darkness. The temperature dropped noticeably with each step. By the time I reached the bottom, I could see my breath forming small clouds in the beam of light. The walls and floor were poured concrete, smooth and free of cracks. The ceiling hung low, maybe 7 feet, with exposed wooden joists. I stood in what appeared to be a main corridor, wider than I'd expected. My light revealed several doorways branching off in different directions. The concrete felt unnaturally cold through the soles of my boots. "Hello?" I called, immediately feeling foolish. The house had been empty for months. Nobody would answer. My voice echoed slightly, suggesting the space was larger than it should be. The basement seemed to extend beyond the footprint of the house above, which made no architectural sense. I chose the nearest doorway on the right. My light revealed shelves lining all 4 walls, each filled with vinyl records and cardboard sleeves. Hundreds of them, arranged alphabetically according to small handwritten labels on the shelves. I pulled one out, Bach's Brandenburg Concertos, the sleeve dusty but intact. I'd never known Grandpa to be interested in classical music. Next to it sat albums by bands I'd never heard him mention: Pink Floyd, The Doors, Tangerine Dream. I replaced the record and backed out, choosing the next doorway on the left. This room contained a small wooden table with 2 chairs. On the table sat a plate with half a sandwich, a glass of water, and an apple. The bread looked fresh, the apple's cut surface barely browned. A folded newspaper lay beside the plate, dated 3 days ago. My throat tightened. Grandpa had been dead for 6 months. Who had been down here eating lunch? I checked the date on the newspaper again, then backed out of the room, my heartbeat quickening. The main corridor continued for about 20 feet before ending at another doorway. The cold intensified as I approached it, the air taking on a slight vibration I could feel against my skin. I stepped through into a larger room with a concrete floor and walls like the others. It contained nothing but a single object in the far corner, a black metallic box sitting on the floor, roughly the size of a microwave oven. No seams or fasteners were visible on its surface. No manufacturer's mark or serial number. From it came a low, continuous hum that made my molars ache and the hair on my arms stand up. The sound wasn't exactly loud, but it filled the space completely, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I approached cautiously, sweeping my light across the box's surface. The beam reflected dully, revealing no detail. Despite the basement's chill, the air around the box seemed even colder, as if it were drawing heat from its surroundings. I crouched 3 feet away, studying it without touching. The humming intensified slightly when my light shone directly on it. A barely perceptible vibration transferred through the concrete floor to the soles of my boots. "What the hell are you?" I whispered. My phone's screen suddenly flickered, then went dark. The flashlight died, plunging me into complete darkness. I pressed the power button repeatedly, but nothing happened. The battery had been at 80% when I came downstairs. Only the humming remained, surrounding me in the pitch black. I backed away carefully, feeling behind me with one hand until I touched the door frame. The corridor outside retained enough ambient light from the trapdoor above for me to make out vague shapes. I stumbled back toward the stairs, my eyes gradually adjusting to the dimness. From somewhere upstairs, Arthur began barking frantically. I took the steps 2 at a time, emerging into the living room's brightness with my heart hammering against my ribs. Arthur rushed to me, pressing against my legs and whining. I knelt and buried my fingers in his fur, feeling his rapid heartbeat. "It's okay, boy. It's okay." I closed the trapdoor firmly and dragged the rug back over it. My phone remained dead, not responding to any attempt to restart it. The battery felt ice cold through the case. Arthur wouldn't leave my side for the rest of the afternoon, following so close he occasionally stepped on my heels. He kept glancing at the rug, growling softly whenever I walked near it. I tried to focus on my repair list, measuring a window for replacement glass and checking the water pressure in the upstairs bathroom. But my thoughts kept returning to the basement, to the fresh food on the table and that black box with its penetrating hum. When evening came, I locked all the doors and windows, checking each twice. I pulled the curtains closed throughout the house and turned on every light. The electric bill would be outrageous, but I couldn't bear the thought of shadows tonight. Arthur refused to sleep in the bedroom. He stayed in the hallway outside the door, positioned as if standing guard. I lay awake for hours, listening to the familiar creaks of the house settling. Just before dawn, I thought I heard something else. A faint humming rising through the floorboards, vibrating the bed frame ever so slightly. It might have been my imagination. It might have been the furnace cycling on. I didn't get up to check. Ryan's F-150 rattled up the gravel drive around 11 the next morning. He parked next to the rhododendron, leaving a good 6 feet between his truck and mine. The radio cut off mid-song when he killed the engine. I watched through the kitchen window as he grabbed a toolbox from the passenger seat and a six-pack from behind the driver's seat. Arthur tensed beside me, ears forward. "It's just Ryan," I told him, though his behavior seemed odd. Arthur knew Ryan well. Had slept on his couch for 2 weeks when I'd been in Chicago for work last year. Ryan's work boots crunched across the gravel. He wore a faded Carhartt jacket with frayed cuffs and a brewer's cap pulled low over his eyes. The spring morning had turned cool, hovering around 45 degrees with a damp wind rolling off the lake. "Look at you, mountain man," Ryan called as I stepped onto the porch. He set his toolbox down with a metallic clank. 2 days in the woods, and you've already got that Unabomber vibe going. I ran a hand over my stubbled jaw. "Didn't bring a razor." "Didn't bring a razor," he mimicked, grinning. "City boy's gone native." He extended the six-pack. "Brought you a housewarming gift." "At 11 in the morning? Beer o'clock somewhere." He shrugged. "Fridge it for later then. How's the place looking?" I gestured toward the door. "Come see for yourself." Inside, Ryan made a slow circuit of the main room, testing the give of floorboards with his boot, running his thumb along the window frames, eyeing the ceiling corners. "Not bad," he said finally. "Better shape than you made it sound on the phone." Arthur had retreated to the hallway, watching Ryan with unusual intensity. When Ryan approached to pet him, Arthur backed away. "What's with him?" Ryan asked, straightening. "Not sure. Been acting strange since yesterday." Ryan set his toolbox on the kitchen counter and popped it open. Inside, tools nested in foam cutouts, screwdrivers, wrenches, a voltage tester, 3 sizes of pliers. everything arranged with a precision that belied his casual demeanor. "So what's the plan, boss? You mentioned loose floorboards and maybe checking the roof." I retrieved my notepad from beside the sink. Made a list. Weather stripping needs replacing on most windows. Back door sticks. There's water stains on the ceiling upstairs that need investigating. Ryan took the list, scanning it with a professional eye. "Easy stuff. We'll knock this out by dinner." We worked steadily through the early afternoon. Ryan crawled under the kitchen sink to replace a leaking P-trap while I caulked windows in the bedrooms. The work felt good, straightforward problems with clear solutions. We fell into an efficient rhythm, passing tools back and forth without needing to ask, measuring twice before cutting anything. Around 2, we broke for lunch. Sandwiches made with bread and cold cuts Ryan had brought in a small cooler. We ate on the porch, watching a red-tailed hawk circle above the tree line. "So," Ryan said, brushing crumbs from his jeans, "you gonna tell me why you really came out here?" I took a long drink of water. "Told you on the phone. Needed a change after Emily." "Bullshit. You could have gotten a change with a new apartment downtown. You came out to your dead grandpa's cabin in the middle of nowhere." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Something happened." I shook my head. "Nothing dramatic. Just needed space." Ryan studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Keep your secrets." He wadded up his sandwich wrapper and stood. "Let's check that roof before it gets too late." We hauled Grandpa's aluminum extension ladder from the shed and set it against the eastern eave. Ryan climbed while I steadied the base. The ladder creaked under his weight but held firm. "Couple shingles missing on the north slope," he called down. "Nothing major. Flashing looks intact around the chimney." He worked his way methodically across the roof line, testing shingles and inspecting the gutters. I watched from below, one hand shading my eyes against the afternoon sun. "Gutters clogged with pine needles on this side," he reported. "Should clear it before the next rain. Otherwise, structure looks solid." When he descended, his hands were dark with grit and bits of decomposed leaves. He wiped them on his jeans, leaving smears across the denim. "Old houses always have secrets," he said, eyeing the roofline. "Found anything interesting exploring the place? Hidden rooms? Love letters in the attic?" The basement trapdoor flashed in my mind. I hesitated. Ryan caught my expression. "You did find something. Come on, spill it." "It's nothing." I began collapsing the ladder sections. "Just a basement I didn't know about." Ryan's eyebrows rose. "A basement you didn't know about? In your grandfather's house? How's that possible?" I struggled with how to explain. "It was hidden, under a rug in the living room." "Hidden basement?" Ryan laughed. "That's some horror movie shit right there." He helped me carry the ladder back to the shed. "You have to show me." "It's not that interesting," I said, trying to sound casual. "Just storage, old records, some furniture." "Then why's your dog been eyeing that living room rug like it might bite him?" Ryan closed the shed door, latching it firmly. "I've known you 15 years, Jamie. You're a terrible liar." Inside, Arthur stood in the hallway watching us enter. He whined softly when Ryan headed for the living room. "See?" Ryan pointed at Arthur. "Your dog knows something's up." I sighed, knowing Ryan wouldn't let this go. "Fine, I'll show you, but there's something strange down there." "Strange how?" I crossed to the braided rug and pulled it back, revealing the trapdoor. "There's this object, a black box, makes a humming sound." Ryan crouched beside the trapdoor, running his fingers along the seam. "What, like a generator? Old furnace, maybe?" "No, it's..." I struggled to find the right words. "It's not like anything I've seen before. When I went down yesterday, it drained my phone battery instantly." Ryan looked up, his expression caught between amusement and concern. "Drained your battery? You sure you didn't just forget to charge it?" "It was at 80%. I pulled the handle, lifting the trapdoor. Cool air wafted up from below, carrying that same faint metallic scent. I'm serious, Ryan. Something's not right down there. Ryan peered into the opening. Stairs look solid enough. He glanced back at me. You've been alone out here too long already, getting spooked by old house noises. Before I could respond, he swung his legs into the opening and started down the stairs. I followed reluctantly, flicking on the light switch I'd discovered earlier that morning. A single bulb illuminated the stairwell with weak yellow light. Arthur remained at the edge of the trapdoor, whining but refusing to follow. At the bottom of the stairs, Ryan whistled softly. This is bigger than I expected. He moved forward, ducking slightly under the low ceiling joists. Looks like it extends past the house foundation. I switched on the main corridor light, another bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. That's what I thought. Doesn't make architectural sense. Ryan ran his hand along the smooth concrete wall. Someone put serious work into this. Not your standard Michigan basement. No dampness, no cracks. He peered into the first doorway. Records, huh? Your grandpa a music buff? Not that I knew of. I followed him into the record room, watching as he examined the shelves. I never heard him play most of these. Ryan pulled out an album at random, Led Zeppelin 4. Some good stuff here. He replaced it carefully and continued down the corridor. What else did you find? I showed him the room with the table and chairs. The sandwich and apple were gone, but the newspaper remained, still open to the crossword puzzle. Someone had completed 3/4 of it in blue ink. Ryan picked up the paper, checking the date. This is from 4 days ago. I know. He set it down carefully. And your grandpa's been dead 6 months. Yes. We stood in silence for a moment, the implications hanging between us. So, what's this box you mentioned? Ryan finally asked, his voice pitched lower than before. I led him to the final room. The black box sat exactly as I'd left it, its surface catching the light without reflection. The humming was immediately noticeable, a steady vibration that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the skull. Ryan stopped in the doorway, his posture stiffening. Whoa. I told you it was strange. He stepped slowly into the room, head tilted as if trying to locate the source of the humming. What is that sound? Comes from the box. Ryan approached it cautiously, stopping about 4 feet away. No seams, no controls. He crouched to examine it more closely. Doesn't look factory-made. The humming intensified slightly, as if responding to his presence. The temperature in the room had dropped noticeably since we entered. I wouldn't get too close, I warned. Seriously, Ryan. Something's not right about it. He glanced back at me, eyebrows raised. You think it's dangerous? It's just sitting here. It killed my phone instantly, and Arthur refuses to come near it. Ryan straightened, shaking his head. Animals get weird about all kinds of harmless things, and phones die all the time. He took another step toward the box. It's probably some art piece your grandpa picked up, or maybe custom. My hands trembled so badly I had to dial 3 times before getting the numbers right. The operator's voice came through clear and professional. 911. What's your emergency? My friend... I swallowed hard, tried again. My friend collapsed. He's not breathing. I think he's dead. Is the person responsive at all? No, nothing. He touched something and just fell. She asked for the address. I recited Grandpa's rural route number and described the turnoff from County Road 8. The operator confirmed an ambulance was on the way, then asked if I knew CPR. I did, barely, from a community college course years back. She walked me through the steps anyway. I need to go back downstairs to him, I said, wedging the phone between ear and shoulder as I approached the trapdoor. You said downstairs? Is this person in a basement? Yes, under the living room. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, the phone suddenly ice cold against my cheek. I don't think CPR is going to help. He doesn't look right. Arthur watched from the hallway, refusing to come closer. I descended the stairs with the operator still talking, her voice becoming tinny and distant as I reached the bottom. Static crackled through her instructions. Ryan lay exactly as he'd fallen, limbs splayed unnaturally. His skin had already taken on a waxy pallor, and his open eyes stared at nothing. The humming from the black box continued at the same steady pitch. I knelt beside him and pressed 2 fingers against his neck like the operator instructed. His skin felt cold and oddly rigid, as if he'd been dead for hours rather than minutes. No pulse, not even the residual warmth of recent life. "Sir, are you still there? Have you started compressions?" "I can't." My voice caught. "He's already cold. Completely cold." The line filled with static, then cleared. "Please begin CPR until the paramedics arrive. They're about 17 minutes out." I set the phone on the concrete floor and positioned my hands on Ryan's sternum. The first compression felt wrong. His chest barely gave under the pressure, like pushing against packed clay rather than flesh. I kept going anyway, counting under my breath, trying not to look at his face. After 30 compressions, I tilted his head back to give rescue breaths, but something stopped me. His lips had turned black at the corners, and thin, dark lines spread outward from his mouth like cracks in dry earth. I pulled back, wiping my hand across my mouth. "I can't do the breathing part," I told the operator. "Something's wrong with his face." She said something about continuing compressions, but the static overtook her voice again. I placed my hands back on Ryan's chest, counting through another set, feeling the strange resistance beneath my palms. The weight stretched into an eternity of mechanical motions, compressing, counting, checking for any response. Nothing changed. The humming from the box seemed to modulate slightly, rising and falling in patterns that almost resembled language. I finally heard sirens in the distance, their wail echoing through the trees. Relief washed over me so strongly I had to sit back on my heels. I checked my watch. 23 minutes since I'd called. The operator had underestimated the response time to this remote location. I climbed the stairs to meet them, legs wobbling beneath me. Outside, red and blue lights strobed across the clearing as 2 vehicles pulled up, an ambulance and a sheriff's department SUV. The gravel crunched under their tires as they parked at angles to each other. 2 paramedics emerged from the ambulance, a heavy-set man with a close-cropped beard and a younger woman with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. From the sheriff's vehicle stepped a female officer, mid-40s with dark hair tucked under her hat. She approached first, one hand resting on her belt near her holster. "You the one who called 911?" she asked, her eyes scanning the property as she spoke. "Yes. He's in the basement." I gestured toward the house. "I tried CPR like they said, but he was already cold when I started." She nodded once. "I'm Officer Campbell. These are paramedics Gutierrez and Jensen. Show us where." The paramedics gathered equipment from the back of their vehicle, a large orange case and what looked like a folded stretcher. I led them into the house, pointing at the open trapdoor in the living room floor. "Down there, last room at the end of the corridor." Officer Campbell looked at the trapdoor with raised eyebrows. "That's not a standard basement entrance." "No, I just discovered it yesterday." My voice sounded flat and distant to my own ears. My grandfather never mentioned it. The female paramedic, Jensen, according to her name tag, descended first, followed by her partner. Officer Campbell gestured for me to go next, then came down behind me. The stairwell felt cramped with 4 people moving through it. At the bottom, Officer Campbell swept her flashlight across the concrete walls and ceiling. "This looks professionally constructed, recent work." I shook my head. "I have no idea when it was built. The house has been in my family for decades." We moved down the corridor to the room where Ryan lay. The paramedics immediately knelt beside him, one checking for a pulse while the other opened their case. Officer Campbell remained in the doorway, her flashlight beam settling on the black box in the corner. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward it. "I don't know. Some kind of machine." I struggled to find adequate words. Ryan touched it right before he collapsed. The male paramedic, Gutierrez, looked up from Ryan's body. No pulse, no respiration. He placed a temperature probe in Ryan's ear, waited for the reading, then frowned. "Core temp shows 82.6. That can't be right." He checked the equipment, then tried again. "Still reading 80s. This man's been deceased longer than a few minutes." Jensen had cut open Ryan's shirt and was attaching monitor leads to his chest. "No electrical activity," she reported. "He's in a systole." Gutierrez pointed to the dark lines spreading from Ryan's mouth. "Look at this discoloration. I've never seen anything like it." Officer Campbell stepped closer, her flashlight illuminating Ryan's face. "Cause of death?" "Can't determine that here," Jensen said, "but appears to be sudden cardiac arrest. No obvious trauma. No signs of prolonged illness." She glanced at me. "Did he have any medical conditions, heart problems, drug use?" I shook my head. "Not that I know of. He was healthy. Works construction." "Worked," Gutierrez corrected quietly. Officer Campbell turned her attention back to the black box. "And you say he touched this object before collapsing?" "Yes." He walked right up to it despite my warnings, put his hand on it, and just fell. She approached the box cautiously, crouching to examine it without touching. "No manufacturer markings. What does it do?" "Nothing that I can tell. Just sits there making that humming sound." "Humming?" She tilted her head. "I don't hear anything." The paramedics paused their work, listening. Jensen shook her head. "No sound coming from it that I can detect." I stared at them in disbelief. The humming filled the room, a constant vibration that seemed to press against my eardrums. How could they not hear it? "It's constant," I insisted. "Like a machine running. Makes your teeth hurt if you get too close." Officer Campbell straightened, her expression carefully neutral. "When exactly did your friend arrive today?" "Around 11 this morning. We were working on repairs to the house." "And you came down here?" "Maybe an hour ago. I didn't check the time." I pressed my fingers against my temples. "He wanted to see the basement after I mentioned finding it yesterday." She pulled a small notebook from her pocket and wrote something down. "I need to call this in. We'll need detectives out here." "Detectives? Why?" "It was an accident." Officer Campbell didn't answer. She stepped into the corridor and spoke quietly into her radio, her back turned to us. The paramedics continued their assessment of Ryan's body, exchanging glances that I couldn't interpret. "We'll need to transport him," Gutierrez said, unfolding a black body bag. "Jensen, help me lift." They positioned the bag beside Ryan's body and prepared to move him. I turned away, unable to watch them zip my friend into plastic. Officer Campbell finished her radio call and returned to the doorway. "Detectives will be here in about 40 minutes, she said. "Meanwhile, I need to ask you some questions, Mr. Miller. James Miller. Mr. Miller, let's go upstairs while the paramedics finish their work." I followed her up the stairs, glancing back once to see the paramedics carefully lifting Ryan's rigid form. In the living room, Arthur still kept his distance from the trap door, pressed against the far wall with his ears flattened. Officer Campbell gestured toward the kitchen. "Let's sit down." We sat at Grandpa's old oak table. She placed her notebook between us and clicked her pen. "Start from the beginning. When did your friend arrive, and what happened leading up to his collapse?" I recounted the morning as clearly as I could. Ryan's arrival, our work on the house repairs, the lunch on the porch, his curiosity about the basement. Officer Campbell wrote rapidly, occasionally asking for clarification about times or exact words exchanged. And you warned him not to touch the box? Yes. I told him it had killed my phone battery instantly when I was down there yesterday. She made another note. Did Mr. Thomas seem anxious or distressed before entering the basement? No, he was joking around like always. Called me Mountain Man. My voice cracked on the last words. A thump from the basement made us both turn toward the trapdoor. Officer Campbell stood, hand moving to her holster. Stay here. She crossed to the trapdoor and called down. Everything okay down there? No response came. She drew her weapon and descended the stairs slowly, disappearing from view. I remained at the table, heart hammering against my ribs. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before she called up. Mr. Miller, you need to come down here. Something in her voice made my skin crawl. I approached the trapdoor, peering down into the dim light. What is it? Now, please. I descended the stairs to find Officer Campbell standing in the corridor, her weapon still drawn but pointed at the floor. The paramedics stood in the doorway of the room where Ryan had been, their expressions a mixture of confusion and alarm. Where is he? Officer Campbell demanded. Where's who? Your friend, Ryan. Where is his body? I pushed past her into the room. The black body bag lay open on the floor, empty. The paramedics' equipment remained scattered around it. Monitor leads, the temperature probe, medical scissors. But Ryan was gone. I don't understand, I said. They were just moving him. We stepped out to get the stretcher, Jensen explained, her voice tight. 30 seconds, tops. When we came back, the bag was empty. Gutierrez pointed to the floor. Look. A dark trail led from the body bag toward the door. Not quite footprints, but long smeared marks like something had been dragged. The substance looked like oil but smelled metallic, like blood. Officer Campbell followed the trail with her flashlight. It continued down the corridor, up the stairs, and across the living room floor to the back door, which now stood open a few inches. Arthur growled from his corner, eyes fixed on the door. Did you move the body, Mr. Miller? Officer Campbell's voice had hardened. What? No, I was with you the whole time. She holstered her weapon and pulled out her radio. Dispatch, this is Officer Campbell. I need additional units at my location immediately. Possible code 37. Suspect may still be on premises. She provided the address, then turned to the paramedics. Wait in your vehicle and lock the doors. They nodded and hurried upstairs. Officer Campbell stepped closer to me, her expression grim. I'm going to ask you one more time. What happened to your friend's body? I don't know. I stared at the trail of dark fluid. This isn't possible. He was dead, completely cold. People don't just walk away after cardiac arrest, Mr. Miller. She gestured toward the stairs. Let's go up. You're going to sit in my vehicle while I secure the scene. You think I did something to him? The accusation hit like a physical blow. He was my friend. I'm not accusing anyone of anything right now. Her hand returned to her holster. But a body is missing, and I need to follow protocol. Outside, the afternoon had turned overcast, dark clouds gathering above the treetops. Officer Campbell directed me to the back seat of her SUV and closed the door firmly. Through the window, I watched her speak into her radio again, then begin a careful inspection of the perimeter, following the dark trail that led from the back door into the woods. Arthur appeared at the living room window, his outline visible through the curtains. Even from this distance, I could see his agitation, pacing back and forth, stopping occasionally to stare out at the gathering darkness. 2 more sheriff's vehicles arrived within 20 minutes, their lights flashing but sirens silent. 4 deputies emerged, conferring briefly with Officer Campbell before splitting up to search the property. One approached her vehicle and opened the driver's door, retrieving a shotgun from a locked compartment. I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass, trying to make sense of what had happened. Ryan had been dead, unmistakably, irreversibly dead. The paramedics had confirmed it, yet somehow his body had moved, leaving that strange, fluid trail behind. The black box. Something about touching it had killed him, and maybe something about it had... what? Reanimated him? The thought was too bizarre to hold on to. A tall woman in plain clothes arrived in an unmarked sedan. Detective, judging by how the uniformed officers deferred to her. She spoke with Officer Campbell for several minutes, both of them glancing toward the SUV where I sat. Eventually, they approached together. The detective opened the door, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Miller, I'm Detective Martinez. I need you to come with me and answer some questions about your friend." I already told Officer Campbell everything I know. Nevertheless, she stepped back, clearly expecting me to exit the vehicle. I climbed out, looking toward the house. "What about my dog? He's still inside." "One of the deputies will check on him," Officer Campbell said. "Right now we need to focus on finding Mr. Thomas." "You won't find him," I said quietly. Detective Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. "And why is that, Mr. Miller?" I met her gaze, suddenly certain of what I was about to say. "Because whatever that box did to him, he's not Ryan anymore." The county sheriff's department occupied a low brick building 15 miles from Grandpa's house. 2 fluorescent strips buzzed overhead in the processing room, where a deputy with nicotine-stained fingers pressed mine into an ink pad. The fingerprinting process left smudges under my nails that wouldn't fully wash off in the small metal sink they directed me to afterward. "Holding until morning," the booking officer said to no one in particular, checking boxes on a clipboard form. He had deep smile lines that didn't match his current expression. "Detective Martinez wants first interview when she gets in." They took my belt, shoelaces, watch, and the 3 crumpled $20 bills from my wallet. Each item made a hollow sound as it dropped into the plastic property bin. The deputy slid a form across the desk for me to sign, then handed me a thin blue blanket that smelled of industrial detergent. The holding cell measured 8 feet by 10 with a metal toilet in the corner and a concrete bench along the back wall. No window. The overhead light stayed on, casting sharp shadows beneath the bench. 3 other men occupied separate cells along the same corridor. One sleeping, one staring at the ceiling, and one muttering rhythmically to himself. I sat on the bench with my back against cold cinder blocks, the blanket pulled around my shoulders. The cell smelled of bleach and something more organic underneath. The muttering man across the hall occasionally punctuated his monologue with sharp laughs that echoed off the concrete. Sleep came in disjointed fragments. I dreamed of Ryan's face, the black lines spreading from his mouth like cracks in pottery. In the dream, his eyes followed me while his body remained perfectly still. I woke repeatedly to the sound of keys jingling as deputies made their rounds, checking cells at irregular intervals. Morning announced itself not with light but with a shift change. New voices, doors opening and closing at the far end of the corridor. A deputy I hadn't seen before slid a tray through the slot in my door. A styrofoam cup of coffee and a shrink-wrapped sandwich. "Miller, interview in 20 minutes. The coffee tasted burnt, but provided enough caffeine to push back the headache forming behind my eyes. I ate half the sandwich, white bread and a slice of processed turkey, before my stomach clenched in protest. When they came for me, 2 deputies escorted me down a series of beige hallways to a room with a metal table bolted to the floor. No windows here either, just a large mirror along one wall that obviously concealed an observation area. A video camera mounted in the corner tracked my movements with a small red light. "Wait here," one deputy said unnecessarily. Where exactly would I go? The room held that particular silence unique to spaces designed for confession, a dead air that swallowed small sounds. I counted ceiling tiles, 28 complete, 6 partial, and floor tiles, 42 complete, 8 partial, while waiting. The chair had been positioned slightly lower than the one across the table, a subtle power differential built into the furniture. Detective Martinez entered 18 minutes later, carrying a manila folder and a paper cup similar to mine. She wore the same clothes as yesterday, black pants and a navy blazer over a white shirt, suggesting she hadn't gone home. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her movements remained precise as she placed the folder on the table and sat across from me. "Mr. Miller," she began, opening the folder, "you've been advised of your rights?" "Last night, several times." She nodded, spreading photographs in front of her face down. "Walk me through yesterday again, please. Start with when Mr. Thomas arrived." I recounted the events for what felt like the 10th time. Ryan's arrival, our work on the house, the discovery of the basement, the black box. Each telling made the sequence feel more dreamlike, less connected to reality. Martinez took notes in small, tight handwriting. "And you maintain that Mr. Thomas touched this black box and immediately collapsed?" "Yes. He just fell, like a puppet with cut strings. Then the paramedics arrived, confirmed death, and the body disappeared while they retrieved equipment from their vehicle." "I know how it sounds." Martinez looked up from her notes. "How does it sound, Mr. Miller?" "Impossible, but it's what happened." She tapped her pen against the folder. "We found blood on your living room floor. Type O positive. Was that Ryan's blood?" "I don't know his blood type, but there was that dark fluid, the trail leading outside. Our technicians say it's blood mixed with something they can't immediately identify, an unusual compound." She studied my face. "Did you harm Ryan Thomas, Mr. Miller?" "No." The word came out hoarse. I cleared my throat and tried again. "No, he was my friend. Friends harm friends every day, usually over money, women, or pride." She leaned forward slightly. "Did you and Ryan have a disagreement?" "The only disagreement we had was about touching that box. I warned him not to." Martinez flipped through her notes. "You previously stated this box killed your phone. What exactly did you mean by that?" "My phone battery drained instantly when I got close to it the day before, from 80% to dead in seconds. Yet you didn't think to warn your friend that something potentially hazardous enough to affect electronics might be dangerous to touch?" "I did warn him. He didn't listen." I pressed my palms against my eyes. Ryan always thought he knew better. Martinez let silence fill the room for 23 seconds by the wall clock. When she spoke again, her tone had softened marginally. "We found Ryan Thomas early this morning. His body was approximately half a mile from your property, in the woods near Caldwell Creek." My hands dropped to the table. "You found him? But how did he—" "That's what I'm trying to determine." She turned over one of the photographs. "This is the scene where we located Mr. Thomas." The image showed forest undergrowth illuminated by harsh camera flash, fallen leaves, pine needles, exposed tree roots. In the center lay something I initially couldn't process, a mass of twisted limbs and torn clothing. A sleeve I recognized as Ryan's Carhartt jacket protruded from the pile, stained almost black with what must have been blood. "That can't be—" I started, but Martinez turned over another photograph. This one showed Ryan's face, or what remained of it. His skin had taken on a grayish cast, like clay left in the sun. The black lines I'd seen forming around his mouth had spread across his entire face, creating a web of dark fissures. His eyes were open, bulging, the whites turned yellow. His expression captured a moment of absolute terror, mouth stretched in a silent scream that had frozen into rigor. My stomach heaved. Martinez slid a metal trash can toward me just as the coffee and half sandwich came back up. I vomited violently, tears streaming down my face as my body tried to expel the horror along with my stomach contents. When I finished, a tissue appeared in my peripheral vision. I took it, wiping my mouth with shaking hands. "Sorry," I mumbled. "That's a common reaction." Martinez flipped the photos face down again. Our medical examiner says he's never seen anything like it. The body shows signs of intense internal pressure, as if every blood vessel ruptured simultaneously. The cause of death is tentatively listed as catastrophic systemic failure, which is essentially medical language for "we have no idea." I stared at the back of the photographs, afraid she might show me more. It was the box. Whatever's in that box killed him. "Mr. Miller," Martinez said carefully, "we've searched your basement thoroughly. There is no black box." "What?" "That's not possible. It was there, in the last room. We found the basement as you described it. Concrete walls, multiple rooms, record collection, even the newspaper on the table, but no black box, no humming sound, and no evidence of any electronic or mechanical device." My mind struggled to process this information. It must still be there. Maybe you missed it somehow. Our crime scene technicians don't miss items described as potential evidence in a death investigation. Martinez closed the folder, which leaves us with limited possibilities. Either this box never existed, or someone removed it between Ryan's death and our arrival. "Or it moved itself," I said, immediately regretting the words. Martinez's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. "Objects don't move themselves, Mr. Miller. Neither do dead bodies." This earned me a long, evaluating stare. "No, they don't, which is why we're having this conversation." She gathered the photographs and returned them to the folder, then stood. "Wait here." The door closed behind her with a solid click. I sat alone for 47 minutes by the wall clock, trying not to think about Ryan's face in that photograph. The metal trash can remained beside me, the smell of vomit adding to my nausea. When Martinez returned, Officer Campbell accompanied her, now dressed in civilian clothes, jeans and a gray sweatshirt with the Sheriff's Department logo. They both remained standing. "Mr. Miller," Martinez began, "we're releasing you at this time." I blinked in surprise. "You are?" "Currently, we lack sufficient evidence to hold you. The investigation into Ryan Thomas's death continues, and you remain a person of interest." She placed a business card on the table. "Do not leave town. We'll need to speak with you again." "What about the box?" I asked. "Are you going to look for it?" Martinez and Campbell exchanged a glance I couldn't interpret. "We're pursuing all relevant leads," Martinez said neutrally. "Officer Campbell will drive you back to your residence. A patrol car will maintain observation of your property for the next 72 hours. "You think I'm in danger?" I asked. "We think you bear watching," Campbell replied, not unkindly. They returned my belongings, belt, shoelaces, watch, money, and led me through a side door to the parking lot where Campbell's personal vehicle waited, a gray Ford Explorer with child-sized soccer cleats visible in the back seat. The drive back to Grandpa's house took 28 minutes. Campbell made no attempt at conversation beyond confirming my address. Through the windshield, I watched the landscape transition from town to countryside, bare maple branches reaching like fingers against the overcast sky. Fields stretched on either side of the county road, brown and dormant, waiting for spring planting still months away. "Your dog's been fed," Campbell said as we turned onto the gravel drive. "Deputy Williams checked on him last night and this morning." "Thank you," I managed. She parked behind my truck and turned in her seat to face me. "Listen, Miller, I've been a cop for 16 years. Never seen anything like what happened to your friend." I waited, unsure where she was heading with this. The detective has her theories. I have mine. Campbell's eyes held mine steadily. "Whatever you're mixed up in, be careful. Some things don't have explanations we're equipped to handle." Before I could respond, she nodded toward the house. "Go on. Your dog's been crying for you." Arthur's barking greeted me before I reached the porch. When I opened the front door, he nearly knocked me over, pressing his body against my legs and whining desperately. His fur smelled of pine and damp earth, as if he'd spent time outside since I'd been gone. Campbell watched from her vehicle until I was inside with the door closed. Through the window, I saw her speaking into her phone before backing down the driveway. A minute later, a marked sheriff's cruiser pulled up and parked just beyond the property line, partially concealed by pines but with clear sightlines to the house. Arthur wouldn't leave my side, not even when I went to the bathroom. He followed so closely his nails clicked against my heels on the hardwood floors. In the kitchen, I found evidence of Deputy Williams's visit, a clean bowl on the floor, the kibble bag neatly closed with a chip clip from the drawer. The house felt different. Police had searched it thoroughly. Drawers left slightly open, cabinet doors not quite closed, items on shelves rearranged. In the living room, the braided rug had been moved aside, the trapdoor left open to reveal the basement stairs below. The light had been left on down there. Arthur stopped at the edge of the living room, refusing to go any closer to the open trapdoor. He sat on his haunches, watching me with anxious eyes. "It's okay, boy," I told him, though we both knew it wasn't. I approached the trapdoor cautiously, half expecting to hear the humming rise up from below. Nothing but silence greeted me. At the top of the stairs, I hesitated, remembering Ryan's face in the photograph, the terror frozen into his features, the black lines spreading across his skin. Martinez had said they found no box. How was that possible? I'd seen it, heard it, felt its effect on the air around it. Ryan had touched it and died instantly. Now it was gone, and Ryan's body had been found twisted and broken in the woods. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. Whatever had killed Ryan was still active, still dangerous. And if the box could somehow move or be moved, anyone might find it. Anyone might touch it. A vehicle approached on the gravel drive, not a police car from the sound of the engine. Arthur's ears perked up and he moved to the window, tail wagging uncertainly. I joined him, peering through the curtains at the silver sedan pulling up behind my truck. The driver's door opened and my heart seemed to stutter in my chest as a familiar figure emerged, auburn hair catching the afternoon light, slender shoulders squared with determination. "Emily." She stood for a moment looking up at the house, one hand shielding her eyes from the weak sun. Then she reached back into the car for her purse and began walking toward the porch. Arthur whined softly beside me, his tail still wagging, but his body tense against my leg. I needed to get her away from here. Away from the house, away from whatever had happened to Ryan, away from the danger I still didn't understand. Before she could knock, I moved toward the door, rehearsing what I would say to make her leave immediately. Behind me, something creaked beneath the floor, a sound like weight shifting on wooden stairs. I sat on the porch steps with a legal pad and a pen, listing ways to destroy the black box. The yellow paper glowed in the evening light, half filled with increasingly desperate ideas. Sledgehammer, acid, fire. Nothing seemed adequate for something that could kill with a touch and disappear at will. Arthur lay at my feet, head on paws, watching the sheriff's cruiser parked 100 yards down the road. The deputy inside hadn't moved in 2 hours, except to answer his radio. The day had faded toward dusk, temperature dropping as shadows lengthened across the yard. I crossed out explosion on my list and added protective equipment in the margin. Thick rubber gloves might help, or those heavy lead aprons from dentist offices. Anything to create a barrier between skin and whatever that box contained. Gravel crunched as headlights swept across the clearing. A silver Accord pulled into the drive and parked behind my truck. Not police. They would have parked alongside their colleague. Arthur's ears perked up, his tail giving one tentative wag. The driver's side door opened and Emily stepped out. My chest tightened at the sight of her. Auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, familiar green jacket zipped against the evening chill. She stood beside her car for a moment, hands pushed deep in her pockets, surveying the house with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Jamie?" she called, using the nickname I hadn't heard in months. I set the legal pad face down beside me. "What are you doing here?" She climbed the steps, stopping 4 feet away, close enough to see her face clearly, far enough to maintain the distance our history demanded. "Leah called me," she said. "Told me about Ryan." Leah, Ryan's sister. Of course she would have my ex-girlfriend's number. They'd bonded over pottery classes last winter. "You didn't need to come all this way." 2 hours isn't all this way. Emily shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "Can we talk inside? It's getting cold." Arthur had moved to her side, pressing against her leg in greeting. She reached down absently to scratch behind his ears while maintaining eye contact with me. The familiarity of the gesture made my throat tighten. "It's not a good time, Em." "Is there a good time to talk about your friend dying?" Her voice softened. "I know we left things badly, but when something like this happens..." The deputy in the cruiser had noticed our interaction, sitting up straighter behind the wheel. I stood, not wanting to have this conversation under surveillance. "Fine, come in." Inside, the house felt colder than it had an hour ago. I flipped on lights against the gathering darkness while Emily followed, her eyes taking inventory of the changes since her last visit 6 months ago. "Your grandfather's place looks exactly the same," she said, running her fingers along the back of the sofa. "Except for that hole in the floor." I moved between her and the open trapdoor. "I'll make coffee." In the kitchen, I measured grounds into the filter with mechanical precision, listening to Emily's footsteps as she explored the living room. Arthur's nails clicked alongside her, his usual wariness apparently suspended for his favorite human besides me. "You sleeping in the big bedroom?" she called. "Yes." Smart. That twin bed always killed your back. I poured water into the reservoir, noticing my hands had begun to shake. Emily's presence felt like a complication I couldn't afford. Not with deputies watching the house. Not with whatever remained in the basement. The coffee maker gurgled to life. I leaned against the counter, pressing my palms flat against the cool laminate to steady them. Emily appeared in the doorway, her face half in shadow. "Jamie, what's really going on? Leah said Ryan died under strange circumstances, and the police questioned you for hours. They think I had something to do with it. Did you?" The directness was pure Emily. No softening the question, no circling the subject. "No, but I couldn't save him either." I gestured toward the cupboard. "Mugs are where they've always been." She retrieved 2, the blue ceramic one she'd always preferred, and a chipped gray one for me. The familiarity of her movements in this space felt like watching footage from another life. "Start from the beginning," she said, setting the mugs beside the coffee maker. I gave her the simplest version. Ryan coming to help with repairs, finding something unusual in the basement, his collapse. I left out the black box, the humming, the strange circumstances of finding his body. Even stripped down, the story sounded implausible. Emily listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she filled both mugs with coffee and handed me mine. "There's more you're not telling me. There's a lot I'm not telling you." I took a sip, scalding my tongue, and for good reason. "You shouldn't be here, Em. It's not safe." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Not safe how? You think whoever killed Ryan might come back?" "Something like that." She set her mug down untouched. "Jamie, I know we're not together anymore, but I still care about you. If you're in trouble, I appreciate the concern, but the best thing you can do is leave, now, before dark." Arthur suddenly stiffened beside her, his ears flattening as he turned toward the living room. A low growl rumbled in his chest. "What's with him?" Emily asked. I set my mug down hard enough that coffee sloshed over the rim. "We need to go. Right now. Get in your car and drive back to Madison." What? I just got here. Please, Em, trust me on this. I took her elbow, trying to guide her toward the door. She pulled away. No, not until you explain what's happening. Arthur's growl deepened, his body trembling with tension. He backed slowly toward the kitchen doorway, eyes fixed on something in the living room. What's down there? Emily asked, nodding toward the open trap door. Is that what Ryan found? Emily, don't... She moved past me, crossing to the edge of the trap door and peering down the stairs. There's a light on. Stay away from there. I reached for her shoulder but missed as she took the first step down. I want to understand what happened to him, she said, already descending. You said he found something down here. I followed, pulse hammering in my ears. Emily, come back upstairs, please. Arthur remained at the top of the stairs, barking frantically now. His warnings echoed down the stairwell as Emily reached the bottom and looked around with curiosity rather than fear. It's just a basement, she said, running her hand along the concrete wall. A nice one, actually, drier than most. I caught up to her at the bottom of the stairs, grabbing her arm. We need to go back up. Now. She frowned, studying my face. You're terrified. What happened down here that you're not telling me? Before I could answer, her head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing in concentration. Do you hear that? My blood turned to ice. Hear what? That humming sound, like an electrical transformer or something. She could hear it. The same sound Martinez and Campbell claimed didn't exist. It's coming from down there. Emily pointed toward the corridor that led to the room with the black box. Don't go near it. I tightened my grip on her arm. Whatever you do, don't touch anything down here. She pulled away again, moving toward the sound with the determined curiosity I'd once found endearing. It's getting louder. Feels almost like it's vibrating through the floor. I followed close behind, fighting the urge to physically restrain her. Emily, please. Ryan died because of what's in that room. She paused at the doorway, looking back at me with a mixture of concern and confusion. What are you talking about? There's something in there. A box. Black, about this big. I indicated dimensions with my hands. Ryan touched it and died instantly. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. And you left it sitting down here? Shouldn't the police have taken it as evidence? They couldn't find it. It was gone when they searched. I swallowed hard, but now it's back. She turned toward the doorway again, peering into the room. I don't see anything except that metal thing in the corner. I looked past her shoulder. The black box sat exactly where it had been when Ryan touched it, its featureless surface seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. That's it. That's the box. I reached for her waist, trying to pull her back toward the stairs. We need to leave. Now. Emily shook free of my grasp, taking another step into the room. It doesn't look dangerous, just weird. Emily, listen to me. Ryan touched it and died. The police found his body with some kind of black veins spreading across his skin. Please don't go near it. The humming intensified as Emily moved closer to the box. I could see its effect on her, the slight tilt of her head, the unfocused look in her eyes. The same expression Ryan had worn right before he reached out. It feels like it's calling to me, she murmured, taking another step forward. Like it knows my name. I lunged for her, wrapping both arms around her waist and pulling her backward. No, don't touch it. She struggled against me with surprising strength, her eyes never leaving the box. Let go, Jamie, I just want to see what it is. It killed Ryan, I shouted, dragging her toward the doorway. It will kill you too. For a moment she stopped fighting, turning to look at me with sudden clarity. You really believe that? Yes, please, Em. Come upstairs with me. She nodded slowly. Okay, let's go upstairs and talk about this. Relief flooded through me as I released my grip on her waist. She took a step toward the doorway, then pivoted suddenly and lunged toward the box. "Emily, no!" I reached for her, but caught only air as she crossed the 3 steps to the box in a single movement. Her hand extended, fingers spread wide, and before I could stop her, she placed her palm flat against the black surface. The humming stopped. Emily went rigid, her back arching at an impossible angle. A sound escaped her throat, not a scream, but a high, thin whine like air escaping a punctured tire. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating until almost no green remained. I grabbed her shoulders, trying to pull her away from the box, but her hand seemed fused to its surface. Her skin had gone chalk white, veins standing out in stark blue relief against her neck and temples. "Emily, let go!" She couldn't hear me. Her body began to convulse, limbs jerking violently as if current flowed through her. I wrapped my arms around her waist, bracing my feet against the concrete floor, and pulled with every ounce of strength I possessed. Her hand came free with a sound like tearing fabric. We fell backward together, her weight driving me into the concrete floor. Emily's body continued to convulse on top of mine, her head snapping back to strike my chin. Blood filled my mouth from a bitten tongue. I rolled her onto her side, trying to remember seizure protocols from a first aid course years ago. Keep airways clear, protect the head, don't restrain movements. "Emily, can you hear me?" No response except the continued convulsions, gradually weakening in intensity. After 57 seconds by my watch, her body went completely still. "Em?" I pressed trembling fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. Nothing. Her skin already felt cool beneath my touch. "Emily, please." I turned her face toward mine. Her eyes remained open, the same terror I'd seen in Ryan's photograph frozen into her features. Dark lines had begun forming at the corners of her mouth, spreading outward in tiny fractures. "No, no, no." I pulled her into my arms, cradling her against my chest. "Please, Em, don't do this." Her body grew heavier, colder by the second. The dark lines continued their progress across her skin like ink bleeding through paper. The woman I had once loved, once planned a future with, had become something unrecognizable. The humming from the box started again, so quietly at first I barely noticed it beneath Arthur's howls. It grew steadily louder, the vibration traveling through the concrete into my legs. I looked up to see the black box trembling slightly on its corner, pulsing with something that resembled life. In that moment, I understood with absolute clarity that the box hadn't just killed Emily and Ryan. It had consumed something vital from them, harvested it, and it was still hungry. I gathered Emily's body in my arms, her limbs already locked in the awkward position of her final moments. She weighed less than she should have, as if something essential had been removed beyond just her life. I carried her toward the stairs, keeping my back to the humming box, feeling its vibration follow me across the room. "I'm sorry," I whispered against her hair, still smelling faintly of the citrus shampoo she always used. "I should have made you leave." One step at a time, I climbed toward Arthur's howling, Emily's body balanced awkwardly in my arms, her head lolled against my shoulder, eyes staring at nothing. Halfway up, I paused to catch my breath, the strain in my back and shoulders already building toward pain. "Almost there, Em," I murmured, knowing she couldn't hear me but needing to say something in the awful silence between Arthur's cries. At the top of the stairs, Arthur backed away from us, his howling cut off as if his throat had closed. He pressed himself against the far wall, eyes fixed on Emily's body with unmistakable terror. I carried her to the couch, laying her gently on the worn cushions. Her limbs remained frozen in their awkward positions, making her look like a broken doll rather than a person. I closed her eyes with trembling fingers, the lids already stiff and resistant. "I'm so sorry," I said again, voice breaking. "You shouldn't have been here." The reality of the situation crashed over me in waves. Emily was dead. Like Ryan, she had touched the box and died instantly. Unlike Ryan, her body remained here, in my house, while a deputy watched from the road outside. I couldn't call the police. Not again. Not with Ryan's death still unsolved and me the prime suspect. Finding Emily's body here would guarantee my arrest for double murder. Arthur whined from his position against the wall, ears flat against his skull. His eyes darted between Emily's body and the open trapdoor, trying to warn me of dangers I already understood too well. I moved to close the trapdoor, lifting the heavy wood panel and lowering it into place. The solid thunk as it settled felt like a coffin lid closing. I dragged the rug back over it, hiding the evidence of what lay beneath. But I couldn't hide what lay on my couch, or in the woods where they'd found Ryan, or in whatever remained of my future. I carried Emily from the basement in stages. Her body had grown rigid in my arms, joints locked at unnatural angles. At the top of the stairs, I set her down to close the trapdoor. The sound of wood settling against wood, unnaturally final. Arthur watched from the hallway, his body pressed flat against the wall, eyes never leaving Emily's face. The living room clock showed 11:23 when I laid her on the couch. Her head tilted back at an impossible angle, neck stiff as cured wood. The black lines had spread from her mouth to her cheekbones in delicate fractal patterns, like frost forming on a window. I tried straightening her limbs, but they resisted, already set in the position of her final moments. "I told you not to touch it," I said to her unseeing eyes. My voice sounded wrong in the quiet house. Too high, too brittle. Why didn't you listen? Outside, the deputy's cruiser remained parked at the edge of the property, headlights off. Just the occasional flash of his radio console visible through the trees. He couldn't see the front door from his position. Couldn't see what I'd carried upstairs. I found a blanket in the hall closet. Wool, gray with red stripes along the edges. It smelled of cedar and mothballs. I draped it over Emily, covering everything but her face. The fabric settled around her contorted form, creating a landscape of strange peaks and valleys. "You shouldn't have come here," I told her. "You should have stayed in Madison." I sat in Grandpa's armchair, the leather creaking beneath my weight. From this angle, with just her face visible above the blanket, Emily almost looked asleep. The black lines marring her skin could have been shadows if I unfocused my eyes enough. Arthur had retreated to the kitchen, his nails clicking against linoleum as he paced in tight circles. Every few minutes he would pause at the doorway, peer at Emily's covered form, then resume his anxious movement. The wall clock ticked steadily, marking minutes that stretched into hours. I couldn't look away from Emily's face, the woman I'd lived with for 3 years, argued with for months, lost entirely just hours ago, her hair still curled slightly at her temples the way it always had when the air grew damp. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though there was no one to hear the apology. "I'm so sorry, Em." At 1:15 in the morning I finally stood, legs stiff from sitting motionless. The house had grown cold, the furnace cycling on with a mechanical groan that seemed obscene in the silence. I needed to do something with her body. I couldn't leave her on the couch indefinitely. Couldn't call the police. Couldn't explain what had happened without sounding completely insane. I moved through the house, checking locks and windows, closing curtains against the night and the deputy's watchful eyes. In the kitchen, I found a half-empty bottle of whiskey in the cabinet above the refrigerator, Grandpa's emergency supply. The seal broke with a satisfying crack, and the first swallow burned all the way down, bringing tears to my eyes that had nothing to do with Emily. "What am I supposed to do now?" I asked the empty kitchen. Arthur had positioned himself in the doorway between kitchen and living room, dividing his attention between me and Emily's body. His ears flattened when I approached with the whiskey bottle, as if disappointed by this predictable human weakness. "Don't judge me," I told him, taking another swallow. "You didn't stop her either." The unfairness of this accusation hit me immediately. Arthur had been upstairs, barking frantically while Emily descended into the basement. He'd tried to warn us both. "Sorry, buddy," I said, reaching to pat his head. He backed away, eyes wary. Not afraid exactly, but watchful in a way he'd never been with me before, as if he no longer recognized the person standing before him. The kitchen clock read 2:48 when I remembered the gun. Grandpa's hunting rifle, a Remington Model 700 with a walnut stock, kept in a soft case at the back of his bedroom closet. I'd seen it during my initial inspection of the house, but hadn't given it much thought. The whiskey bottle was a third empty by then, the alcohol having done nothing to clarify my thoughts. If anything, it had only intensified the crushing weight on my chest, the certainty that everything had gone irrevocably wrong. I climbed the stairs slowly, each tread creaking beneath my weight. Arthur followed at a distance, his nails clicking a steady counterpoint to my footsteps. Grandpa's bedroom remained exactly as I'd left it that morning, bed made with hospital corners, reading glasses folded on the nightstand, flannel shirts hanging in the open closet. The rifle case leaned against the back wall, partially hidden behind a row of boots. The case unzipped with a metallic rasp. Inside, the Remington gleamed dully in the overhead light, smelling faintly of gun oil and storage. Grandpa had always been meticulous about maintenance. The bolt action moved smoothly when I tested it, clicking into place with precision. I knew where he kept the ammunition, in a locked metal box on the top shelf of the closet. The key hung on a nail just inside the door frame, exactly where it had been when I was 12 and he'd first shown me how to safely handle firearms. The box contained 3 boxes of cartridges, each holding 20 rounds of .30-06 caliber ammunition. I selected a single cartridge, rolling it between my fingers, feeling the weight of the brass case and lead tip. Beside the ammunition sat a folded sheet of paper, hunting license from last season, expired now with Grandpa's signature at the bottom. I carried the rifle and single cartridge downstairs, moving carefully on legs that didn't seem entirely stable. In the living room, Emily remained motionless beneath the blanket, face peaceful despite the black lines spreading across her skin. "This is all wrong," I told her as I loaded the single round into the chamber. The mechanical sound of the bolt sliding home seemed too loud in the quiet house. I sat in Grandpa's rocking chair, positioning the rifle butt against the floor between my feet, barrel pointing toward the ceiling. The wooden floorboards felt solid beneath my boots, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the cold metal of the barrel. One pull of the trigger would end this nightmare. One pull and I wouldn't have to explain Emily's body, or Ryan's death, or the thing in the basement that hummed with hungry anticipation. My finger found the trigger guard, tracing its outline. Grandpa had taught me proper trigger discipline when I was 10. Never touch the trigger until you're ready to fire. Keep your finger along the side until the target is acquired and the decision to shoot has been made. "I can't fix this," I whispered to Emily's still form. "I don't know how to make this right." Arthur whined from the doorway, his body tense as if preparing to run. He could sense my intention, understand the wrongness of what I contemplated. I gripped the barrel, turning it slowly until the muzzle pressed against my temple. The metal felt impossibly cold against my skin, the diameter of the opening precisely large enough to deliver an end to consciousness. My hand shook violently, fingers slippery with sweat despite the chill in the room. The wall clock ticked past 3:15 in the morning. Outside, an owl called once, the sound floating through the night air like a question. I closed my eyes, trying to find the courage to pull the trigger. Emily's face appeared in my mind, not as she looked now, transformed by whatever the box had done, but as she had been last summer, laughing as we kayaked across the lake, hair wet from swimming, shoulders pink from sun. The memory was so vivid I could almost feel the July heat on my skin. My finger found the trigger, applying the slightest pressure. Not enough to fire, just enough to feel the resistance. Arthur barked suddenly, a sharp, commanding sound that startled me enough that the rifle barrel slipped from my temple. He stood in the center of the room now, body rigid, eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that communicated more clearly than words. "What am I doing?" I whispered, lowering the rifle to my lap. The answer came with surprising clarity. I was surrendering, giving up, leaving the black box in the basement to wait for its next victim. I engaged the safety and set the rifle against the wall beside me. My hands left damp prints on the walnut stalk, evidence of fear that would evaporate by morning. I scrubbed my palms against my jeans, trying to wipe away the decision I'd nearly made. "You're right," I told Arthur, who had relaxed marginally since I'd put down the gun. "This doesn't solve anything." The whiskey bottle sat on the coffee table beside Emily's covered form. I picked it up, considering another drink, then set it down untouched. I needed clarity now, not the false comfort of numbness. The clock showed 4:23 when I finally understood what I had to do. The black box had killed Ryan and Emily with a single touch. It had disappeared when the police searched, then returned when they left. It hummed with purpose, waiting in the basement for its next victim. It needed to be destroyed. Not tomorrow. Not after I called someone for help, or tried to explain what had happened. Now, before it could hurt anyone else. I moved to the kitchen, opening drawers and cabinets with methodical precision. Grandpa had been a practical man who kept everything in its place. The utility drawer beside the sink contained what I needed: heavy rubber dishwashing gloves, yellow and lined with cotton. Not ideal protection, but better than bare hands against whatever the box contained. "I have to try," I told Arthur, who watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable in the dim light. From the hall closet, I retrieved Grandpa's toolbox, the red enamel one with his initials stamped into the metal. Inside lay hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, all arranged in perfect order. I selected the heaviest hammer, testing its weight in my palm. The wooden handle felt smooth, worn to a patina by years of use. Arthur followed as I collected my supplies: hammer, gloves, flashlight. When I approached the living room rug covering the trapdoor, he stopped abruptly, hackles rising along his spine. "I know," I said quietly, "but I have to try." The room felt 10 degrees colder than it had moments ago. My breath didn't quite fog in the air, but it seemed to hang visible for just an instant, before dissipating. The rug shifted beneath my boots as if something moved beneath it, though I knew this had to be imagination. The floorboards remained solid when I tested them with my weight. I pulled back the rug, exposing the trapdoor with its copper handle that gleamed in the low light despite the tarnish. Arthur backed against the far wall, a continuous low growl rumbling from his chest. The handle felt ice cold even through the rubber gloves. I pulled upward, lifting the heavy wooden door to reveal the stairs descending into darkness. The basement light remained on where I'd left it, illuminating only the first few steps before shadows consumed the rest. "I'll be back," I promised Arthur, though I wasn't entirely certain this was true. I placed one foot on the first step, testing my weight against the wood. It held firm, showing no sign of the rot that might be expected in a structure this old. The second step creaked slightly but remained solid. Arthur's growl suddenly shifted to a bark, sharp, urgent, warning. I turned to reassure him, but the expression on his face stopped me cold. This wasn't anxiety or fear. This was terror, pure and primal, directed not at the basement, but at me. Before I could process this change, Arthur lunged forward with startling speed, teeth bared, eyes wild. I raised my arm instinctively to protect my face as 80 pounds of muscle and fur slammed into my chest, driving me back from the open trapdoor. His teeth found my forearm, clamping down with enough force that I felt the crunch of breaking skin through the fabric of my shirt. Pain flashed white-hot up my arm as I staggered backward, trying to break his grip without hurting him. "Arthur, stop!" He released my arm only to circle and attack again, this time going for my ankle with single-minded determination. His teeth tore through denim and into flesh, bright points of agony that buckled my knee and sent me crashing to the floor. "Arthur, it's me." I rolled away from him, clutching my bleeding arm against my chest. "What are you doing?" My dog, my companion, my friend, stood between me and the basement stairs, body lowered into an attack position I'd never seen him use before. Blood matted the fur around his muzzle, my blood, while his eyes reflected something unrecognizable, something that wasn't Arthur anymore. "Buddy, please," I said, voice breaking. "It's me. It's Jamie." He growled again, deeper this time, the sound vibrating through the floorboards beneath us. When I shifted my weight slightly, testing if I could stand, he tensed immediately, ready to spring. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. Arthur was trying to keep me away from the basement, away from the black box, even if it meant attacking me to do it. Blood seeped through my shirt sleeve, warm against my skin. The hammer I'd brought lay on the floor where I'd dropped it during Arthur's attack, just beyond my reach. The flashlight had rolled against the wall, its beam creating long shadows that stretched across the room like grasping fingers. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I won't go down there. Not now." Arthur's growl subsided slightly, but his body remained tense, ready to attack again if I moved toward the stairs. I slowly pushed myself to a sitting position, wincing as pain flared through my injured arm and ankle. The bite wounds throbbed in time with my pulse, each beat sending fresh blood seeping through fabric. "I understand," I told him, though I wasn't sure I truly did. "You're trying to protect me." The first light of dawn had begun filtering through the curtains, turning the room from black to deep blue. Emily's form on the couch remained motionless, covered by the gray and red blanket. The clock on the wall showed 5:37. Arthur maintained his position between me and the basement stairs, watching every movement with unnervingly focused attention. The dog I knew, the one who slept at the foot of my bed and chased squirrels through the yard, seemed gone, replaced by something driven purely by instinct. "I need to destroy it," I said, more to myself than to Arthur, "before it hurts anyone else." Arthur's ears flicked forward at the sound of my voice, but his stance didn't relax. Blood had begun to dry in his fur, turning from bright red to rust brown around his muzzle. I needed tools, protection, a plan. The rubber gloves clearly wouldn't be enough. I needed something more substantial. Leather work gloves, maybe, or multiple layers. Something to create a barrier between my skin and whatever energy the box contained. My grandfather's workshop behind the house might have what I needed. If I could make it outside without Arthur attacking again, I might find better equipment. Heavier tools, protective gear, something to destroy the box without touching it directly. I shifted my weight again, testing my injured ankle. Pain shot up my leg, but the joint held when I carefully stood, keeping my back against the wall and my movements slow. "I'm just going to sit in the kitchen for a while," I said calmly, as if talking to a nervous child. "I won't go near the basement." Arthur watched with suspicious intensity as I limped toward the kitchen, leaving a trail of blood droplets on the hardwood floor. Each step sent fresh pain through my ankle, but I kept moving, not daring to look back until I reached the doorway. Arthur remained by the trapdoor, body still tense but no longer in attack position. He hadn't followed, which meant I might have a chance to reach the back door if I moved carefully enough. In the kitchen, I grabbed a clean dish towel from the drawer and wrapped it tightly around my forearm, creating a makeshift bandage. Blood immediately soaked through the white fabric, creating a spreading crimson stain. The pain had settled into a steady throb that matched the pulse in my temples. Through the window over the sink, I could see the deputy's cruiser still parked at the edge of the property. Soon he would be replaced by the day shift, another set of watchful eyes monitoring the house. If I was going to reach the workshop unobserved, I needed to move before full daylight. I found a second towel and bound my ankle over my jeans, tight enough to provide some stability without cutting off circulation. The bleeding seemed less severe there, the denim having provided some protection against Arthur's teeth. The back door stood 15 feet away, its deadbolt secured from the inside. If I could reach it without alerting Arthur, I might make it to the workshop before he could stop me. I needed tools, protection, a way to destroy the box without falling victim to whatever had taken Ryan and Emily. I took a deep breath, testing my injured ankle once more. It held my weight, barely, enough to get me where I needed to go. The hammer remained in the living room where I'd dropped it, but Grandpa's workshop would have better tools, heavier ones, the kind that might crack open whatever material the black box was made from. Through the kitchen window, I watched the sky lighten from deep blue to pale gray. Morning approached with indifferent steadiness, bringing with it decisions that couldn't be postponed any longer. I had failed to protect Ryan, failed to save Emily, failed even to control my own dog, who now stood guard over the very thing that had destroyed everything I cared about. The only path forward lay through that basement, through confrontation with the black box that waited in the concrete room below. The box that hummed with anticipation, that seemed to know my name just as Emily had said it knew hers. I turned the deadbolt slowly, wincing at the metallic click that seemed too loud in the quiet house. The back door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing the workshop 20 yards away across dew-damp grass. Whatever waited in the basement would still be there when I returned. It had patience, after all. It had waited for Grandpa, for Ryan, for Emily. Now it waited for me. I waited until the sky turned gray at the edges before heading to the workshop. Arthur remained in the living room, stationed between me and the trap door like a sentry. Blood had dried in his fur, turning from bright red to rust brown around his muzzle. My arm throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage, each pulse a reminder of teeth-breaking skin. The workshop stood 20 yards from the back door, a weathered structure with cedar shingles that matched the main house. Dew soaked through my socks as I limped across the grass, leaving dark footprints behind me. The temperature had dropped overnight, my breath forming small clouds that dissipated in seconds. Grandpa's padlock hung open on the workshop door. I hadn't checked it during my initial property inspection, but the key remained in the lock as if he'd just stepped away. The hinges protested when I pushed the door open, releasing the complex scent of sawdust, motor oil, and mouse droppings. Morning light filtered through grimy windows, illuminating workbenches along both walls. Pegboard panels displayed tools in neat rows, their outlines traced in black marker. Some spaces stood empty, the missing hammer or wrench carried off to fix something and never returned. Cobwebs stretched between ceiling rafters, delicate and undisturbed. I found what I needed hanging on the back wall, a sledgehammer with a 16-inch handle and an 8-pound head. The wooden grip felt smooth against my palm, worn from years of use. I tested its weight, the effort sending fresh pain through my injured arm. Beside the workbench sat a metal cabinet, its door secured with a hasp, but no lock. Inside, I found what I was looking for: a can of charcoal lighter fluid, half empty, and a box of wooden matches. If breaking the box didn't work, burning might. On the lowest shelf, I discovered heavy leather work gloves with gauntlet cuffs that would cover my forearms. They smelled of mink oil and old sweat, the leather cracked but still supple. I slipped them on over my bandaged arm, wincing as the pressure triggered fresh pain. The deputy's cruiser remained visible through the workshop window, parked where it had been all night. He sat motionless behind the wheel, perhaps dozing or waiting for his replacement. Either way, he couldn't see the workshop from his position. I gathered my supplies, sledgehammer, lighter fluid, matches, gloves, and added a heavy canvas tarp folded on a nearby shelf. The fabric felt stiff with age and embedded sawdust. I tucked a flashlight from the workbench into my back pocket, then checked the battery with a quick click. The beam shone yellow rather than white, but it would serve. The walk back to the house took longer. each step on my injured ankle producing a dull throb that traveled up my leg. The deputy's car hadn't moved. No other vehicles approached along the gravel road. Emily's silver Accord remained parked behind my truck, its presence a reminder of decisions that couldn't be undone. Arthur waited inside the back door, his posture tense but no longer aggressive. His eyes tracked my movement as I set the sledgehammer against the kitchen counter with a dull thud. The leather gloves creaked when I flexed my fingers, testing their flexibility. "I have to do this," I told him, though his expression suggested no understanding. "I have to destroy it before it hurts anyone else." He followed me to the living room, maintaining distance between us. Emily's body remained on the couch beneath the gray blanket, her face exposed. The black lines had spread further across her skin, reaching her temples and jawline in delicate fractal patterns. The rug covering the trapdoor appeared undisturbed. I approached cautiously, hammer in one hand, flashlight in the other. Arthur stopped 5 feet away, his body lowering into a crouch. "I know you don't want me to go down there," I said quietly, "but I have to end this." A low growl rumbled from his chest, building in volume as I reached for the edge of the rug. His nails clicked against hardwood as he paced in a tight circle, eyes never leaving my hands. I pulled the rug back in a single motion, revealing the trapdoor beneath. Arthur's growl deepened, his lips pulling back to expose teeth still stained with my blood. The hair along his spine stood straight up, transforming him from the gentle companion I knew into something feral and dangerous. "Stay back," I warned, lifting the sledgehammer slightly. "I don't want to hurt you." The trapdoor handle felt cold even through leather gloves. I pulled upward, lifting the heavy wood to reveal stairs descending into shadow. The basement light remained on where I'd left it, a yellow glow that barely penetrated the darkness. Arthur's growl cut off abruptly. The silence lasted 3 seconds before he launched himself at me, 80 pounds of muscle and teeth colliding with my chest. I stumbled backward, losing my grip on the hammer as we crashed into the coffee table. Glass shattered beneath us, digging into my shoulder through my shirt. His teeth found my thigh, clamping down with crushing force. Denim tore, then skin, blood blossoming across blue fabric in an expanding stain. Pain flared white-hot up my leg as I fought to push him away without causing serious injury. "Arthur, stop!" I grabbed his collar, trying to pull his head back. "It's me!" He released my leg, only to lunge for my throat, forcing me to block with my forearm. His teeth caught the thick leather glove, puncturing through to graze skin beneath. I twisted sideways, using my weight to roll him off me. We separated long enough for me to grab the fallen hammer. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the burning pain in my thigh and ankle. Blood soaked my jeans from mid-thigh to knee, each heartbeat pumping more through torn flesh. Arthur circled, body lowered, eyes fixed on mine with predatory focus. Nothing of my companion remained in that gaze, just cold animal calculation. He tensed to spring again, muscles bunching beneath his fur. I swung the hammer in a low arc, not aiming to connect but to create space between us. "Back off," I said, voice breaking. "Please." He charged again, faster than I could react. His teeth found my calf, tearing through fabric and skin in a single savage motion. I brought the hammer down reflexively, catching him across the shoulders with a sickening thud. Arthur yelped, releasing my leg and stumbling sideways. He shook his head once, then settled into his attack stance again, seemingly unfazed by the blow. Blood pooled around my boot, soaking into the hardwood. I couldn't fight him and destroy the box. Not like this. Not with injuries multiplying and strength fading with each passing minute. "I'm sorry," I whispered, raising the hammer higher. "I'm so sorry." When he charged the third time, I was ready. The hammer connected with the side of his head, not full force, but enough. The impact produced a sound like a melon splitting, followed by absolute silence. Arthur collapsed mid-leap, his body skidding across blood-slick hardwood to stop at my feet. His legs twitched once, then went still. A small pool of dark fluid spread beneath his head, soaking into gray fur. No. The word escaped as barely a breath. No, no, no. I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing my hand against his chest. His heart beat weakly beneath my palm, each pulse separated by too many seconds. Blood leaked from his ear and the corner of his mouth, bright against golden fur. "Stay with me," I said, voice cracking. "Please, buddy. Stay with me." His eyes remained open but unfocused, pupils dilated to near-perfect circles. When I stroked his head, he didn't respond. No tail wag, no ear twitch, just the shallow rise and fall of his chest growing more irregular by the second. I couldn't save him. That knowledge settled like lead in my stomach as I watched each breath grow shallower than the last. My dog, my friend, my last connection to the world before everything went wrong. Dying because I'd chosen the hammer over retreat. "I'm sorry," I said again, knowing he couldn't hear me. "It wasn't you. It was never you." His final breath escaped in a small sigh, barely disturbing the fur around his muzzle. The stillness that followed seemed absolute, as if the entire house held its breath in witness. I sat beside him for 17 minutes, according to the wall clock, my hand resting on cooling fur. Blood continued seeping from my various wounds, creating a mingled pool beneath us both. The pain had receded to a dull background throb, overshadowed by the hollow ache spreading through my chest. The humming from the basement grew louder in the silence, a pulsing vibration that traveled through floorboards and into the soles of my boots. It seemed almost triumphant now, a mechanical purr of satisfaction. I stood slowly, testing my weight on injured legs. Blood had soaked my jeans from thigh to ankle on the right side, the fabric sticking to skin with each movement. The sledgehammer felt heavier now, requiring both hands to lift despite the pain in my bitten arm. The trapdoor remained open, stairs descending into partial darkness. I picked up the flashlight from where it had fallen during the fight, tested it with a click, and started down the stairs. Each step sent fresh pain through my injured leg, the wound reopening with movement. At the bottom, I paused to catch my breath. The air felt colder than before, carrying that same metallic scent I'd noticed during previous visits. The corridor stretched ahead, doorways branching left and right, ending at the room containing the black box. The humming intensified as I limped forward, vibrating through the concrete floor and up into my bones. My teeth ached from the resonance, a high-pitched whine joining the lower frequencies as I approached the final doorway. The black box sat exactly where it had been when Emily touched it, a seamless cube approximately 18 inches on each side, its surface so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The flashlight beam dimmed when directed at its surface, power draining visibly as I watched. I set the light on the floor, pointing away from the box. The sledgehammer felt impossibly heavy now, my arms trembling with the effort of holding it upright. Blood continued trickling down my leg, forming a small puddle around my boot. "You took them all," I said to the box, voice echoing in the concrete room. "Ryan, Emily, Arthur, you don't get anyone else." The humming shifted slightly, modulating in patterns that almost resembled language. The temperature dropped noticeably, my breath forming visible clouds that hung suspended in the still air. I planted my feet shoulder-width apart, ignoring the protest from injured muscles. The leather gloves creaked as I adjusted my grip on the hammer handle, positioning my hands for maximum leverage. I drew a deep breath, lifted the hammer above my shoulder, and swung with every remaining ounce of strength. The hammer connected with the box's surface with a sound like struck crystal, high-pitched and resonant. Vibrations traveled back through the handle into my arms, numbing my hands instantly. The box remained unmarked, not even a scratch where the metal head had struck. I swung again, aiming for the same spot. This time, the impact produced a deeper tone, like a massive bell rung underwater. The vibrations intensified, rattling my teeth and blurring my vision. Still, the box showed no damage. The third swing landed with all my weight behind it. Something changed. A hairline fracture appeared along one edge of the box, no wider than a human hair, but definitely there. The humming shifted to a higher register, taking on an urgent quality that hadn't been present before. "You can break," I said through gritted teeth. "You're not invincible." I targeted the fracture with my next swing, connecting precisely where the line met the corner of the box. The crack widened slightly, spreading perhaps an inch along the surface. The humming became a shriek, painful enough that I nearly dropped the hammer to cover my ears. Each subsequent blow expanded the network of cracks, spreading like ice forming on a pond. The box began to vibrate visibly, lifting slightly off the concrete floor before settling again. The air around it shimmered as if viewed through heat waves, despite the freezing temperature. My arms burned with fatigue, shoulders screaming from the repeated impacts. Blood loss made my head light, vision narrowing to a tunnel focused entirely on the fracturing box. I lost count of the blows, 15, 20 more, each one producing new cracks in the once perfect surface. The hammer connected one final time, striking the weakest point where multiple fractures intersected. The box split open with a sound like the world tearing apart, a deafening crack followed by absolute silence. Light poured from the opening, not illumination, but its opposite. A darkness so complete it glowed. The sensation defied logic, yet I could find no other way to describe the energy emanating from the broken shell. Cold air rushed outward in a physical wave that knocked me backward against the concrete wall. Something moved within the fractured box, something that wasn't solid or liquid or gas, but some state of matter I had no language for. It flowed upward like smoke but maintained cohesion like a liquid, curling into complex patterns that twisted in impossible ways. The substance recognized me. I can't explain how I knew this, but certainty filled me as it oriented toward my position. It assessed me with senses I couldn't comprehend, reaching tendrils of not quite matter in my direction. My vision blurred, darkness creeping in from the edges. The last thing I registered before consciousness failed was the substance flowing past me toward the stairs, moving with purpose toward the house above. I woke to silence. The basement light flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows across concrete walls. I lay sprawled where I had fallen, one arm bent awkwardly beneath me, legs splayed across the cold floor. The sledgehammer rested beside my hip, its head gleaming dully in the unsteady light. Blood had pooled and partially dried beneath my thigh, creating a tacky sensation when I tried to move. My watch showed 11:47, nearly 2 hours since I'd descended the stairs. Each muscle protested as I pushed myself to a sitting position, using the wall for support. The black box lay in pieces across the floor, shards of material that resembled obsidian, but felt more like ceramic when I cautiously touched one with a gloved finger. The largest fragment measured perhaps 6 inches across, the smallest no bigger than a thumbnail. Together they formed an incomplete puzzle with pieces missing. The humming had stopped completely. The basement felt ordinary now. Cool, slightly damp, smelling of concrete and dust rather than metal. Whatever had emerged from the box was gone, leaving only broken remnants behind. I gathered the fragments, collecting them in the canvas tarp I'd brought from the workshop. Each piece felt unnaturally cold, even through leather gloves. When I'd collected all visible shards, I tied the corners of the tarp together, creating a makeshift sack. Standing required 3 attempts, my injured leg buckling twice before supporting my weight. The stairs loomed ahead, an impossible vertical challenge given my current state. I tucked the bundle of box fragments under one arm and began the climb, using the hammer as an impromptu cane. Halfway up, I noticed something at the top of the stairs, a dark shape blocking the rectangle of light from the living room above. My vision, still blurry from blood loss and unconsciousness, couldn't immediately identify the form. 3 steps higher, recognition hit like a physical blow. Arthur lay sprawled across the top step, one paw hanging over the edge, eyes open and glazed with death. His fur appeared dull in the overhead light, blood dried to black crust around his ears and mouth. No. The word emerged as barely a whisper. You were upstairs, you were... Memory returned in fragments, Arthur attacking, the hammer connecting, his body on the living room floor. I'd left him there, dead or dying, before descending to destroy the box. Yet here he was, positioned as if he'd been dragging himself toward the basement when death finally claimed him. His legs stretched behind him, creating furrows in the dust on the wooden steps as if he'd used his front paws to pull himself forward despite catastrophic injury. I climbed the remaining steps, careful not to disturb his body. Up close, I could see what I'd missed from below, the dark lines spreading from his mouth and eyes, identical to the patterns that had marked Ryan and Emily after they touched the box. It got you too, I said, voice breaking, even without touching it. Whatever had emerged when I broke the box must have encountered Arthur on its way upstairs. The substance had recognized him as a threat, the creature that had tried to prevent me from reaching the basement and eliminated him as it had the others. I sat on the step beside him, balancing the bundle of fragments on my knees. His fur felt cool beneath my fingers, body already stiffening with rigor. I stroked his head gently, avoiding the wound where the hammer had struck and the strange dark lines that marked his transformation. I tried to protect you, I told him, knowing the lie even as I spoke it. I hadn't protected anyone, not Ryan, not Emily, not Arthur. I'd failed them all through ignorance, hesitation, and ultimately violence. The living room beyond the trap door appeared unchanged, Emily's body still on the couch, covered by the gray blanket. Blood stained the hardwood where Arthur and I had fought, smeared in arcs and footprints that told the story of our struggle. I needed to move, to continue collecting the pieces of the broken box to ensure nothing remained that could harm anyone else. But exhaustion pressed down like a physical weight, making even the thought of standing again seem impossible. The deputy's cruiser would still be outside. Soon his replacement would arrive, perhaps wondering why Emily's car remained parked in my driveway overnight. Questions would follow, then investigations, then discoveries I couldn't explain. Arthur's body grew heavier as I lifted him, cradling him against my chest despite the pain in my bitten arm. I carried him into the living room, leaving the bundle of box fragments on the stairs temporarily. His weight seemed wrong, too light, as if whatever had killed him had taken something essential beyond just his life. I laid him beside the couch where Emily lay, arranging his legs to look natural, as if he'd simply fallen asleep on the rug. The dark lines across his face seemed less prominent in the living room light, almost invisible unless you knew to look for them. "I'm sorry," I whispered to them both. "I should have left this place when I had the chance." Blood loss and exhaustion made the room tilt slightly as I turned back toward the trapdoor. I needed to finish what I'd started, gather every fragment of the black box and dispose of them where they could never be reassembled. But first, I needed to rest. Just for a moment, just long enough to gather strength for what came next. I sank into Grandpa's armchair, the leather creaking beneath my weight, my injured legs stretched before me, blood soaking the denim from thigh to ankle. I sat on the concrete floor of the basement, my back against the cold wall, surrounded by obsidian-like fragments of the box. Blood had pooled and dried beneath my thigh, forming a tacky seal between denim and skin. My watch showed 12:11. The sirens started as distant wails, barely audible through the basement walls. Someone had called the police. Perhaps a neighbor had spotted Emily's silver Accord in my driveway overnight. Perhaps the deputy had reported suspicious activity after watching me stumble to the workshop before dawn, returning with tools and a pronounced limp. Or maybe someone had heard the sledgehammer connecting with Arthur's skull, the sound carrying through the morning stillness. The sirens grew louder, moving up the county road toward the house. 4 minutes, maybe 5 before they arrived. Not enough time to explain 3 bodies and a basement that shouldn't exist. I gathered the scattered fragments with trembling hands, collecting each shard into the canvas tarp. Some pieces crumbled at my touch, turning to fine powder that clung to the leather of my gloves. Others remained solid, edges sharp enough to slice through canvas where they pressed against the fabric. The largest piece, roughly the size of my palm, still hummed faintly, a barely perceptible vibration that traveled through the glove and into my bones. I wrapped it separately in a shop rag before adding it to the bundle, then tied the corners of the tarp together, creating a makeshift sack that weighed perhaps 12 pounds. Standing required 2 attempts, my injured leg buckling under my weight before grudgingly supporting me. The stairs looked impossibly steep, each wooden tread smeared with Arthur's blood where he'd dragged himself down toward the basement. Toward me. I climbed using the wall for support, the bundle clutched against my chest with one arm, the hammer dangling from my other hand. At the top, I paused to listen. The sirens had stopped, replaced by the sound of tires on gravel and car doors opening. Arthur's body remained where I'd last seen it, sprawled across the top step with his front paws extended as if reaching for something. In death, he looked smaller somehow, his fur dull under the overhead light. The black lines spreading from his mouth had darkened further, turning from gray to true black in the hour since I'd found him. "I'm sorry, buddy," I whispered, stepping carefully over his cooling body. "I can't fix this." In the living room, Emily lay beneath the gray blanket, her face exposed to the afternoon light filtering through half-closed curtains. The black lines had spread across her entire face now, creating an intricate web that disappeared beneath her hairline. Her skin had taken on a waxy quality, eyes sunken into darkened sockets. Voices carried from outside, a woman giving directions, several men responding with clipped acknowledgments. Car doors slammed in sequence, radios crackled with dispatcher codes. I moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. 3 patrol cars had parked in a loose semicircle around the front yard. Emily's Accord and my truck remained where we'd left them. 6 officers moved across the clearing with practiced efficiency, establishing a perimeter around the property. At the center stood Detective Martinez, pointing toward the workshop while speaking into a handheld radio. There was no way out the front. The back door remained my only option. I limped through the kitchen, the bundle of fragments clutched against my chest, leaving blood-smeared footprints across linoleum. Pain flared with each step, fresh blood seeping through the fabric wrapped around my thigh. The hammer felt impossibly heavy in my hand, its metal head scraping against the floor when my grip weakened. Through the kitchen window, I could see 2 officers approaching the workshop, weapons drawn but pointed downward in ready position. A third moved along the tree line at the property's edge, scanning the underbrush methodically. "James Miller." Martinez's voice carried clearly through the morning air. "This is Detective Sarah Martinez. We need to speak with you. Please come to the front door with your hands visible." I eased the back door open, checking the immediate area for officers. The gap between house and forest measured approximately 40 yards of open ground, mown grass offering no concealment. The closest cover was a stand of white pines at the property's eastern edge, their lower branches starting 6 feet above ground level. "Mr. Miller, we have reports of a disturbance at this address. Please respond." Martinez's voice had moved closer to the house. I slipped through the door and pressed my back against the cedar siding, keeping the structure between myself and the officers at the workshop. The bundle of fragments shifted against my chest, individual pieces grinding together with a sound like crushed glass. 3 options presented themselves: surrender and attempt explanation, hide somewhere on the property, or run for the tree line and disappear into the forest beyond. The first would inevitably lead to arrest when they discovered the bodies inside. The second merely postponed the inevitable. I chose the third. 28 seconds later, I pushed away from the wall and moved toward the trees in a limping run, each footfall sending lightning bolts of pain up my injured leg. The hammer swung in my right hand, its weight throwing off my balance. The bundle pressed against my chest with each labored breath, individual fragments shifting and settling. I'd covered perhaps 15 yards when a shout came from behind me. "Movement east side. Suspect fleeing toward the tree line." I didn't look back. The pines grew closer with each lurching step, their trunks offering potential cover if I could reach them before. "Police! Stop right there!" This voice came from my left, one of the officers who had been checking the workshop. He stood 30 feet away, weapon raised to shoulder level, stance wide and balanced. I kept moving. "Last warning, stop or I will fire." The trees stood just 10 yards ahead. If I could reach them, the underbrush beyond might provide enough cover to disappear. The officer wouldn't have a clear shot once I entered the forest proper. Something whistled past my ear, close enough that I felt the displacement of air against my skin. The crack of the gunshot followed a millisecond later, echoing across the clearing. Birds erupted from nearby branches, their wings beating frantically against morning air. The trees enveloped me in shadow and the scent of pine resin. I ducked beneath low-hanging branches, putting solid trunks between myself and the pursuing officers. The forest floor dropped away in a gentle slope, carrying me downhill toward denser cover. More shouting behind me, the voices overlapping with urgency. "Suspect entered the woods. East perimeter. Cut him off at the access road. K9 unit en route. E to 14 minutes. I moved deeper into the forest, my pace slowing as underbrush thickened around my legs. The bundle of fragments knocked against my chest with each step, some pieces grinding to powder inside the canvas. Blood from my various wounds left a clear trail behind me. Drops on leaves, smears on tree trunks where I steadied myself. A trained dog would have no trouble following. The slope steepened as I descended, loose soil giving way beneath my boots. Pine trees gave way to mixed hardwoods, maple, oak, and birch, creating a dappled canopy overhead. The hammer caught on hanging vines, nearly pulling from my grip before I tucked it into my belt. A stream appeared ahead, perhaps 6 feet across and 8 inches deep, water moving swiftly over smooth stones. I waded through, gasping as cold water reached my knees and soaked into my blood-crusted jeans. The current tugged at my injured leg, nearly toppling me before I reached the opposite bank. Water might temporarily mask my scent from tracking dogs, but it wouldn't hide the blood trail. I needed to move faster, put more distance between myself and the pursuing officers. I checked my watch. 12:38. 17 minutes since I'd fled the house. The officers would have found the bodies by now. Emily on the couch. Ryan's absence. Arthur's cooling form by the basement stairs. Enough blood smeared across hardwood to suggest serious injury. Their investigation would shift from wellness check to homicide, the perimeter expanding accordingly. The terrain leveled briefly before rising again toward a ridge visible through thinning trees. If I could reach higher ground, I might orient myself, perhaps find a road or trail leading away from the search area. My leg had begun to stiffen, the makeshift bandage soaked through with fresh blood. Each step required conscious effort, the pain constant and sharp. The bundle of fragments seemed heavier now, pulling at muscles already taxed beyond endurance. I reached the ridge 43 minutes later, emerging onto a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley below. From this vantage point, I could see Grandpa's property, the cedar-shingled house surrounded by patrol cars, their light bars spinning blue and red in the early afternoon sun. The workshop stood open, officers moving between buildings with purposeful strides. A quarter-mile beyond the house, officers and civilians formed a line at the forest's edge, preparing for a systematic search of the area I'd fled through. 3 canine units moved among them, handlers holding leashes taut as the dogs caught my scent. I needed to keep moving. The ridge continued west for perhaps half a mile before curving south toward a second valley. If I followed it, I might avoid the search parties forming below. The rocky ground would leave fewer traces than forest soil, potentially confusing the dogs if wind direction cooperated. The bundle shifted against my chest, individual fragments settling into new configurations. The largest piece, the one that still hummed faintly, pressed against my sternum, its vibration penetrating leather gloves and shirt fabric to resonate with my heartbeat. It couldn't stay with me. None of it could. The box had killed Ryan and Emily with a touch, had infected Arthur with the same black lines even after being broken. Carrying the fragments meant risking further contamination. I had to bury them, scatter them across miles of wilderness where they could never be reassembled. The ridge offered limited options for disposal, exposed rock with minimal soil accumulation. I needed to reach the valley beyond, find softer ground that would accept what I carried. I moved west along the ridge, keeping my profile low against the skyline. The bundle knocked against my chest with each step, individual fragments grinding together inside the canvas. Blood continued seeping through the bandage around my thigh, leaving sporadic drops on stone that dried almost immediately in the afternoon sun. 3 hours later, I reached the curve where the ridge turned south. My watch showed 3:52. The search parties had spread through the forest below, their fluorescent vests visible through gaps in the canopy as they moved in a grid pattern outward from the house. Dogs barked occasionally, their handlers calling confirmation when they detected traces of my passage. I descended into the second valley, moving from exposed rock to mixed forest in gradual stages. Oak and maple dominated here, their leaves forming a thick carpet underfoot that masked my footsteps, but retained clear impressions of my passing. Dogwood and redbud grew in the understory, their spring flowers long since fallen. A game trail appeared, winding between trees in a roughly southern direction. I followed it for 20 minutes before veering east toward higher ground. The bundle seemed determined to return to the valley I'd fled, its weight pulling against my grip as if possessing its own will. Near a stand of young beech trees, I found what I needed, a section of ground soft enough to dig with minimal tools. I set the bundle aside and used the hammer's claw end to break through surface roots, exposing dark soil beneath. My injured leg protested as I knelt, fresh blood soaking through denim where scabs had cracked with movement. The hole grew slowly, each strike of the hammer against earth producing small advances. 6 inches deep, 8, 12. The sides collapsed partially as I worked, soil falling back into the excavation with quiet, rustling sounds. When the hole reached 18 inches, I untied the canvas bundle and removed the largest fragment, the one wrapped separately in the shop rag. It hummed against my gloved palm, vibration traveling up my arm to set teeth on edge. This piece couldn't stay with the others. Whatever power remained in the box seemed concentrated here. I resealed the main bundle and placed it in the hole, covering it with soil tamped down using the hammer's flat side. When the earth looked undisturbed, I scattered leaves and twigs across the surface, obscuring any sign of recent digging. The largest fragment remained, humming in my hand, with unmistakable hunger. I tucked it inside my shirt pocket, its vibration continuing through multiple layers of fabric. This piece would need its own burial site, far from the others. Night approached as I moved south through thinning woods. My watch showed 7:26 when I reached another stream, this one wider and deeper than the first. Hunger had begun to gnaw at my stomach, reminding me that I'd eaten nothing since the previous evening. The stream offered clear water at least. I knelt on smooth stones and drank from cupped hands, the cold liquid momentarily easing the dryness in my throat. Fish darted between underwater shadows, brook trout measuring perhaps 6 inches, their spotted backs almost invisible against the rocky stream bed. I had no means to catch them, no fire to cook with even if I succeeded. The thought of raw flesh turned my stomach despite growing hunger. I followed the stream east for half a mile before finding a suitable campsite, a small clearing beneath overhanging pine boughs that would provide minimal shelter from overnight dew. Fallen branches yielded enough material to construct a lean-to, the structure barely large enough to cover my upper body if I curled into a tight ball. The hammer served as both tent stake and defensive weapon, driven into soft earth at arm's reach from my intended sleeping position. The box fragment hummed in my pocket as I worked, its vibration a constant reminder of what I carried. Full darkness arrived at 8:45. Aircraft sounds passed overhead at irregular intervals. Helicopters moving in search patterns across the forest, their spotlights sweeping between trees approximately a mile north of my position. They would continue searching through the night, expanding their perimeter until they found me or determined I had left the immediate area. I removed the fragment from my pocket and placed it on a flat stone beside my makeshift shelter. Its humming seemed louder in the darkness, almost conversational in its modulation. The surface no longer appeared purely black but contained subtle variations, patches of deeper darkness that shifted and flowed like oil on water. Sleep came in fragments, each period of unconsciousness broken by sounds both real and imagined. Twice I woke to find myself reaching for the box fragment, my hand hovering inches above its vibrating surface before conscious control reasserted itself. Dawn arrived with fog clinging to the stream and drifting between trees in ethereal wisps. My watch showed 5:17. Every muscle protested as I pushed myself to a sitting position, injuries from the previous day having stiffened overnight into near immobility. The box fragment had moved approximately 4 inches from where I'd placed it, now resting against a small rock at the edge of my sleeping area. I had no memory of touching it during the night. Hunger had become a constant presence, my stomach cramping with emptiness. The nearest potential food source lay miles away. Grandpa's pantry, now certainly under police surveillance. I would need to find sustenance elsewhere or risk weakness that would make continued evasion impossible. I tucked the fragment back into my shirt pocket, its humming immediately resuming against my chest. The hammer came free from the earth with a wet, sucking sound, soil clinging to its metal head in clumps. Aircraft sounds returned with daylight, helicopters moving in systematic patterns across the forest canopy. They remained focused on the area north of my position, suggesting the search had not yet expanded to include this valley. Dogs would present the greater threat, their tracking abilities extending beyond visual range. I broke camp at 6:05, erasing signs of my presence as thoroughly as possible before continuing southeast along the stream. My injured leg functioned marginally better after rest, though each step still produced sharp pain where Arthur's teeth had torn flesh. The day passed in careful movement punctuated by extended rest periods whenever aircraft sounds approached. I located a blackberry thicket around midday, the fruit not yet fully ripe but edible enough to temporarily ease hunger. Purple juice stained my fingers and left smears across my already filthy shirt. By late afternoon, I had covered approximately 4 miles, according to landmarks tracked against the sun's position. The fragment hummed constantly in my pocket, its vibration occasionally shifting in intensity when I changed direction. It seemed to pull westward, back toward the valley where I'd buried the other pieces. I found the second burial site as the light began to fade, a rotting stump surrounded by loose soil that yielded easily to the hammer's claw. The hole reached 24 inches, deeper than necessary for the single fragment, but somehow appropriate given its continued humming. When I removed the piece from my pocket, its vibration intensified immediately, the surface rippling with those oil-like patterns of deeper blackness. I placed it at the bottom of the hole, covering it with soil in 6-inch layers, each tamped down before adding the next. The humming continued through 18 inches of earth. I added more soil, packing it tightly with the hammer's flat side. The vibration diminished slightly but remained perceptible. Only when the hole was completely filled and the surface disguised with scattered leaves did the sound finally fade to near inaudibility. As I turned to leave, something shifted beneath the freshly disturbed earth, a subtle movement like a creature burrowing upward. I stood motionless, watching as a small dome formed in the soil, rising perhaps half an inch before settling again. The fragment wanted out. I placed the hammerhead directly over the disturbance and pressed down with my full weight, compacting the soil until resistance suggested bedrock beneath. The movement ceased, the earth becoming still once more. Night fell as I moved away from the burial site, each step carrying me further from the humming that had become my constant companion. The absence felt wrong somehow, as if I'd left behind something vital rather than dangerous. I made camp 400 yards from the buried fragment, constructing another rudimentary lean-to beneath a stand of cedar trees. Their aromatic branches provided better shelter than the previous night's pines, though the ground beneath contained more exposed roots that pressed uncomfortably against my back. Sleep came easier without the fragment's presence, though dreams filled the darkness with images I couldn't escape. Emily's face with black lines spreading across pale skin. Ryan's contorted body in the police photograph. Arthur's final moments, teeth bared in protective fury before the hammer connected with his skull. I woke at 4:38 to the sound of voices carrying through pre-dawn stillness. Flashlight beams swept between trees approximately 200 yards north of my position. Search parties working through the night, their patterns more thorough than I had anticipated. I broke camp quickly, erasing signs of my presence before moving southeast through darkness punctuated by occasional moonlight. The voices faded behind me as distance increased, though aircraft sounds suggested the search perimeter continued expanding in all directions. By mid-morning, hunger had become debilitating, my thoughts increasingly focused on finding food rather than evading capture. I hadn't eaten,